Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it's brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long at the Wild Wild West, Tropicana, and Harrah's Resort Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here. The Eagles off on Sunday, but there's plenty of stuff to dive into as they get ready for the Las Vegas Raiders. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, which dropped this morning. You can take a listen to that for all the latest Eagles news and notes, and right here during Football at 4. What's going on, Moshe?
How you doing, Mike? Did you have a good weekend?
I did have a good weekend, and, when the Eagles don't play on that Sunday, like I power washed my porch yesterday, you do stuff, right? I'm listening to
productive, yeah.
Yeah, you feel like productive, and the weight of now what I did do yesterday, I have YouTube TV, so I was outside, had the TV on, power washing, listening on the radio, all that kind of stuff, and I watched a lot of, the NFC race to me. I feel like there's 5 legitimate lock playoff teams already in the NFC. Divisions are already running away. The Rams or Arizona, one of those teams are going to win the division. The other one's going to be a legit wild card. And then I feel like it's wide open after that. So I'll ask this. In the wide openness, which right now New Orleans at 3-2 and Minnesota at 3-3, is Philadelphia a part of the wide openness?
I think that's to be determined. I certainly think they can be. And we've talked about these games coming up against Las Vegas, Detroit, Denver, New Orleans as those kind of games where you'll get a better feel for who the Philadelphia Eagles are. If you can kind of, in the next 5 or 6 games go 3-3, 4-2, then you'll start to feel a little bit like things are trending better for the Eagles. You might feel like the Eagles are a little bit like the Giants last year. I think they started off, 0-6 or 1-6. And then obviously at the end of the year, if the Eagles don't lose that game to Washington, Giants win the division. So, yeah, I think there'll be an opportunity. There's 2 teams to watch, right? The Bears and the Vikings. They seem to be these uneven teams, and you're not sure what to expect. The Vikings look a lot better over the last 2 weeks than the way they started. The Bears play good defense. They obviously have their offensive doldrums. And then, of course, the Saints, you can throw them in the mix, and then the 49ers. Who are they really? Are they going to be a team that kind of catches fire and over the second half and makes that last spot difficult to get? Or are they going to be just like the Eagles and kind of up and down and up and down?
Yeah, I know Carolina, by the way, they're in that mix too. They lost
team,
again. Yep. And it's funny because I just saw somebody tweet out the Eagles have the easiest schedule remaining according to the FPI, ESPN, whatever. So in other words, they don't have Tampa Bay. They don't have Kansas City. They do have Dallas again. I guess the other game on the schedule that is is the Chargers. Every other game, I think you could say you're going to be competitive in, unless obviously injuries come into play. But right now, as situated, they should be competitive pretty much the rest of the schedule until they play Dallas. That Charger game's interesting because it's here, and the Chargers just got Rochambeau this week. They were terrible in that game.
Yeah,
but you should be competitive the rest of the way.
You should be. I mean, I think that's a fair expectation. Look, we've said that with the Eagles' offensive and defensive lines, they should be competitive in almost every game. Obviously, we talked about the first 6 games. You got the Super Bowl champs, the 2 years ago Super Bowl champs, and the Cowboys looked like they were going to be a very good team offensively, and their defense has improved. So you can sort of understand from a big picture standpoint why their record is what it is. Now, some of how they got there can be perplexing, and it's been talked about. But obviously, this second half of the schedule lighter, and it opens up to where they should be competitive. They have the talent to compete in almost all of these games. The Chargers one's interesting, right? Because I feel like this past weekend was an anomaly. They didn't score. They scored 6 points or something like that. I feel like in general, if you want to beat them, you're going to have to outscore them, and that could be tough for this Eagles team. But it is in Philadelphia, so that should be to their advantage, and we'll see what happens there. I think what happens, Mike, is it becomes a bigger question of, let's say they're a better team over the second half, not markedly better, but better. Let's say they win 8 or 9 games and get that last spot that you were talking about here. If you go back to last year, I forget. I was the Bears, I think, that claimed that last spot at 8-8, and they get knocked out in the first round, and then they have turmoil in the offseason, and then they're trying to kind of rebuild here this year, and we'll see what happens. But what do you make of it if the Eagles do get to that 8-8 mark, or are you satisfied with your quarterback, your head coach, and everything going on that you only think you need to make some tweaks, or do you you have to obviously make decisions there? It's tough.
Well, it's definitely different than being, say, 4-13 and having to make decisions, because at that point I think you're really at square one. Like, man, we're a lot worse than we really thought we were, right? I mean, if you end up with like a 4-win team, that means you didn't improve at all throughout this season.
Sure, but I'll go back to the Giants. They were very improved over the last half of last year, to the point where they were in it for the division title at the end, and then they made a series of moves because they thought they were ready to take that next step. They signed Galladay, Adoree Jackson, drafted Tony after they traded down, and they were feeling good about themselves. And now they stink. So I don't know if maybe they felt too good about themselves. I mean, you never penalize a team for trying to add talent. I'm sure they would have done this regardless, but it can be a hoodwink a little bit, on how you finish and what you are at the end of the year.
Yeah, Geoff, let's talk about some of the things that are going on. Lane Johnson today finally kind of filled us all in on what's going on here, and obviously he's saying, hey, depression, anxiety, but he's back. I mean, does that mean he's back playing right away? I know that kind of feels like, hey, the guy just got back from depression and anxiety. We're asking if he's playing, but obviously he is back with the team now. Does that mean they're going to integrate him right back into the lineup?
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I don't have a direct answer for that. I imagine that he would not have come out and said, hey, I'm back, if it meant he was not going to be ready for practice, because he's been back in Philly for a little while here, and they've taken their time to go through whatever they need to go through to get him to the point where he can say, I'm back. And now I would imagine he'll be back there at right tackle at practice, and we'll see how it goes from here.
Right, and then we would imagine that Mailata moves back to the left side.
I would think so. I really think so. I think Dillard goes back to being a backup, and your guards stay at Landon Dickerson on the left side and Jack Driscoll on the right side.
You almost have to in that situation, though, Moshe. I mean, you signed the guy to a mega contract. You can't all of a sudden deem that contract was a mistake and say, well, Dillard played pretty well, we're going to just stick with him. I mean, that would look terrible.
Yeah, I don't. And then what would you do with Jordan Mailata? Would you try to move him to guard? You wouldn't do that. So you play your best five, and Lane Johnson and Mailata at right and left tackle are part of your best five.
All right. Also, let me get your take now that Ertz has been traded. First, let's start with, we talked a lot in the offseason. We all thought he got traded and what they could get for him. Did Howie Roseman get what he could? I mean, would you suggest that deal was the best deal and that they held out long enough and they got the best they could?
Well, they certainly held out long enough. I would agree with you on that. And they probably did get the best deal they could. And it goes back to the offseason. They didn't trade him because they thought that they could get better. And at the end of the day, they did not. They were wrong about what they thought. And if you look at the situation, the way I look at it is I think that in their attempt to do that, they made their dynamic worse for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the year, because you had Dallas Goedert waiting to be the guy, toiling there, not getting targets, not getting catches, blocking at times when he could be running routes. And I think that held him back. I mean, I'm not going to say it's exactly like Alshon Jeffrey holding back Travis Fulgham last year, but I think that there's some similar DNA in that, and that you had a situation forced upon you that you didn't have to have. At the end of the day, I mean, geez, you could have even held on to Zach, not played him, and let him sign in the offseason and gotten yourself the same value out of the comp pick formula. So this move was made not for value, but as Howie said, to make Dallas Goedert the guy. But you had that opportunity going into the year to do that already. And I don't know why Howie felt like he was going to get something better. I don't.
Right. Well, so let's they end up getting a corner in the deal and a 5th-round pick. Was there any thought of you that says, hey, maybe you should have seen what you could have got for Goddard?
Well, knowing that both are free agents, even if you got a 2nd-round pick or a third, I mean, you're not going to get a 2nd-round pick for Goddard, maybe a 3rd-round pick, and then Ertz walks at the end of the year. What do you have? What's the value of that? I traded away Ertz. I'm sorry, I traded away Goddard. Ertz walks at the end of the year, and now I'm left with Jack Stoll, Tyree Jackson, and a bunch of picks to hope to get a player as good as Dallas Goedert. So to me, it wouldn't have made much sense.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I know that, just kind of thinking outside the box is, hey, if I got a pick that was a second rounder as opposed to a fifth rounder, I keep Ertz and try to sign him, because Ertz has played. That's the problem. You can't tell whether Goddard is the guy because he hasn't got enough playing time. You can't tell if Ertz is kind of washed up, which he doesn't appear to be, or if he's the same player that he was because he doesn't get, so how do you feel that Goddard now will make out because of this?
I think Goddard gives them something that they desperately need, and that's kind of a physical element to their offense. They don't have a running game right now, so they're not very physical in the trenches in that standpoint. They're not very physical at wide receiver. Dallas Goedert is a guy, and I know he doesn't have a whole lot of catches, but I think he's averaging 14.3 per catch this year, which is probably second highest on the team. And it's not like he's a deep ball runner. He's a guy that when you put the ball in his hands, you can see him break tackles, run through guys. I mean, he's good at that. And, this team badly needs some intermediary level wide receiver who can move the chains that way. So I think that he's going to wind up, as long as the quarterback and the offense can feature him and figure out a way to get him the ball. I think we've seen every time that Dallas Goedert has had a chance to be a weapon in the passing game, he's been a weapon in the passing game. And I would expect that to continue.
You would hope so. Now, is there any hypothesis as to why they haven't been able to get both Ertz and Goddard the ball more featured? Like, I look at it and say, I'm watching now, obviously their offense struggled last night, but Seattle in the third quarter, I thought they did a really good job play action. They limit things for Geno Smith, but they did things in the play action game where Geno got some good looks. Like, I feel like Geno Smith right now is where they should be looking at Jalen Hurts a little bit.
Well,
right?
If that's their answer, we're going to make Jalen like Geno. I think we already have our answer then for long-term quarterback. But I'm with you in that the hypothesis that I have that I think is pretty clear is that they don't have an offensive identity. Not that they lack one.
Which is a question you asked Sirianni the other day, and his answer was mind-boggling.
Yeah, yes, among many of his answers. So it's not that they don't have an offensive identity in their minds. They just don't have one on the field. And clearly what they've got to do is get the ball in the hands of guys who make plays for them, who are proven playmakers. One would be Dallas Goedert. Another would be, hold on to your hats, everybody, Miles Sanders. Those are guys they have to figure out better ways to get the ball to. So I do think that they will try to figure out ways to get the ball to Dallas Goedert now that he's the number one receiver. And you even heard Howie talk about how he's not going to be here at a discount. So they've got to figure out, not only to use him, but to maximize his value because they want to sign him to an extension.
Right. So obviously Goddard will hopefully get an uptick in usage anyway. And hopefully we'll see how that kind of reinvigorates or helps this offense. Like, I don't want to make it sound like this offense has been, flat. They scored 30 points more times this year than all of last year already. They have had some moments. It's just very frustrating the way they're getting there sometimes. And a lot of that goes back to the quarterback play. And I thought last week he kind of struggled a little bit. And, you asked about an identity, and Sirianni tells you, well, most teams don't know what their identity is. That to me is a odd answer to say, well, we don't know what our identity is or who we want to be.
Yeah.
It's almost to me like, well, we're trying to figure out, as we keep saying in this conversation, Mosher, we're trying to serve two masters here. We're trying to figure out who this guy is and do this at the same time.
Yeah, it's funny because I had planned to ask him a different question, and Rob Motti came right before me and asked the question I wanted to ask, which was, basically what Rob was asking is, are you doing what you're doing to really you're trying to cater everything to what you think Jalen Hurts does well, and how do you weigh that versus every quarterback needs to be able to make X number of plays in the NFL from X different amount of formations. Like, you just have to be able to do that, right? And that was the question Rob was asking. And some point in that answer, Nick Sirianni said, a wise man said, you never want to go to extremes. And I almost slapped myself in the head because if this is not an extreme level of passing compared to running, then I don't know what would be. So it was kind of perplexing to hear him say that. I think, again, Nick's an over-explainer and an over-talker, so he winds up saying things that are just going to be contradictory. And right now he's just trying to shovel whatever he can to make things look better than they are, but they're not good right now.
No, obviously they have been very reliant on the pass here in recent weeks. Now, defensively, let me get your take on. They obviously got out. They were the first half anyway. They were completely overmatched. Did Gannon make adjustments, or did Tampa Bay take their foot off the gas?
A little bit of both. I mean, first of all, they didn't take their foot fully off the gas because they did go for it on a fourth down where they probably should have just kicked a field goal if you go back and look on it. So they stayed aggressive from a play calling standpoint. Gannon did change things. He was very soft in the first quarter for his coverages. He did force the issue a little bit more moving forward. Not sure that made a ton of a difference, but you saw punts. I mean, the Bucks punted 3 or 4 times. The Eagles did have an interception. But in my mind, 28-22 is not indicative of what the score really was. The Bucks had 400 yards. The Eagles had 200 yards. So I can't sit here and say the Eagles defense was a lot better. They were just somewhat better. And when it came time to make a play, they couldn't. First, Jannard Avery with the bad penalty. And then obviously Antonio Brown makes an unbelievable catch between 2 defenders there to really kind of give them the opportunity to kneel the ball out. But so was it competitive as it looked? No. But what is the defense getting better or doing things differently? I think they are a little bit. The problem is it's the whole step forward, 2 steps back thing. They're playing. They took Eric Wilson off the field a lot, right? He's been benched. I credit them. He was one of their free agent signings, and they weren't afraid to say, "You're not doing a good job. Sit down." We sometimes see that, like Nate Gary last year, a coaching staff will not sit a guy down when he's not playing well, and he had to get injured for him to lose his job. But then you're playing Davion Taylor more, which is great because he needs the experience. But just going back and watching the film, like Brady was licking his chops to throw at Davion Taylor's side. He knew this guy did not play a lot of football, and he threw at his side of the field quite often there. So that's part of the growing pains.
I want to get. I know you guys on Inside the Birds. You had the sourced. Look at the tape here, and what are the Eagles? I mean, are they like with Jalen Hurts? What are they seeing from him? Is the team putting too much in his lap? Are they trying too much to help him? What do you kind of see? What do people see about how they're kind of handling Hurts now through 6 games?
Yeah, so I think people have some fair criticisms of the offensive structure, but there are also some plays that Jalen is just not making, and it's not the offensive play caller's fault. He has a tendency. Greg Cosell was on this last year. He noticed it from Jalen's tape in the 4 games he played last year. Tendency to leave the pocket early. We've seen that. Tendency to drop the eyes, meaning you're not looking downfield while you're leaving the pocket. We've seen that. And also lately, when he has to throw a deep ball, he lowers his arm. Like he has to wind up, because he doesn't have great arm strength, like a Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen. The unfortunate thing is people don't always understand arm strength. They think if you can throw the ball 50 or 60 yards in the air, that's great arm strength. That is not. Almost every quarterback in the NFL can do that. Russell Wilson can do that, right? And he doesn't have the strongest arm. But Russell Wilson will throw that deep ball so well because he'll throw it before his wide receivers are even open, knowing that they're going to be open. So it's the timing of that. And Jalen has to be better with his timing and anticipation in absence of being able to just flick it and throw a frozen rope 50 to 60 yards. And that's why you saw on the deep balls to Rager, he's dropping his hands instead of keeping them up and releasing immediately. And that a second and a half, Mike, allows the coverage to catch up to the throw. And in those cases, at least Jalen got the DPI out of it, but we've seen in other cases where the ball's just been broken up or picked off.
Now, you mentioned defensive pass interference. Rieger drew 2. Is that something? Is that development? I mean, is that just him running down the field? The ball was thrown up. Because when you draw, that's a skill drawing interference penalties. And I don't know, did they try to take some shots down the field with him with that vein?
Yeah, and they've been trying to do that at times this year. I mean, he is one of the few guys they have that can just take a top off a defense with pure speed. So he's there for that reason. I still think that they need to manufacture touches for him as far as end around screens, good screens, high-low patterns, working the middle of the field. and they're not doing that as much. Or sometimes they are. I'm not saying Nick's not. Sometimes they are, and again, Jalen not seeing it. By the way, one thing I wonder with Jalen, I want to ask around about this, and next time I talk to you, I'll get a good feel. I feel like he definitely has the tendency to backpedal when the pressure comes in through the middle on him. And I do wonder, at only being 6'1" with a pretty large offensive line in front of him, if he's obstructed from seeing the field a whole lot. Russell Wilson's very short, but you also notice Russell, they get him outside of the pocket a lot, or he does a good job of navigating around the pocket, around the blocking to see what he needs to see. And I wonder if that's holding him back.
Do you think that, like, I don't know, was Dillard getting whipped the other night? I mean, because it felt like Hurts was taking the ball and literally, like, it was like almost like a sprint option right. It felt like he was getting out of that pocket, like, immediately.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because that's another tendency you're seeing, not only just fleeing the pocket early, but also it's the right side of the field for him a whole lot. I mean, it's got to be like 60 to 70% of where he's looking to throw is on the right side of the field, and that's making him somewhat predictable. And it's not just always an Andre Dillard thing. You're going to obviously funnel the pressure, right, a certain way if you know he's only looking there. So you're going to funnel it off his blind side because you know he's looking right, and bam, you start to – I mean, Shaq Barrett, I was shocked how quickly he could get up on a guy like Jalen Hurts who can clearly run, but they were on to something there.
All right, Eagles and the Raiders this week. Moshe will be back on Wednesday to kind of give us some more, deeper look at the matchup and some of the news and notes around this team. Let me ask you this. Normally, we'll leave with this because normally on a bye week, their bye week isn't until way late in the year. You know, you do self-scouting and maybe some depth chart changes. Do we see any of that happening for, I was going to say Oakland, Vegas?
Maybe. I think that's definitely a good point. And then, I know Howie said he's not going to be a seller, but he just pawned off Zach Ertz for basically nothing and said that's so that we can look at Dallas Goedert more. So to me, when he says we're not going to be a seller, what I see is I don't slam the door on him making any trades. He's just always going to couch it that it's best for the team and they still expect to compete.
Fletcher Cox?
The seller has that whole it's sure, absolutely. Any veteran, who you don't think might be here next year or past, or somebody you can get value for, I absolutely think. And he will, if he were to trade Fletcher Cox, he'll still tell you, hey, we have Javon Hargrave playing really well. In the second year of a third-year deal, we're going to have to extend him. We're going to get some more time for Milton Williams. We're going to do a few things differently. It's going to be better for our scheme. He'll never say it's a seller move, because that means like you're giving up, and he's not going to relent that.
All right, that's something to keep an eye on, because there's a lot of veterans. You got Lane Johnson, who obviously has a murky situation to then try to trade him, but he would be a veteran player. Brandon Brooks is hurt, so I guess he's out of the mix. Maybe Derek Barnett, because of all the penalties. You just say, all right, get out and see what we can get you. There's a lot of interesting names that could be interesting for other teams with how this team is set up right now. 2-4. And, of course, the Raiders on Sunday, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher, the Inside the Birds podcast is out. Check that out at Inside Birds on Twitter. All right, Moshe.
All right, Mike. Have a good one.
All right, Geoff Mosher's back on Wednesday from the Inside the Birds podcast in the Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. It's brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destination all season long. Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Harrah's Resort Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. Moshe is back on Wednesday. Andrew DeCecco's here tomorrow.